what we're starting a little bit earlier than we're going to because we want to replay for people that. Is there anyone here who has not seen the video of the new show that happened in Washington? I guess there's a handful. Okay, but this way it'll be part of this video as well. So what we're going to do is, as you probably know, like Dawn 30 this morning, the detail, a kind of a military technology and culture video magazine went on the air and broke a story prepared by Leslie Kean and by Richard Blumenthal, Ralph Blumenthal, that were the authors of the New York Times piece back in December of 2017 that has begun such an important change in the era relating to the UFO phenomenon. The same two authors have now released an additional story that, according to the newscast you're getting ready to see, has raised the issue to an entire additional level. We obviously have spent the past 75 years, basically, since Roswell at least, our entire UFO citizens community working hard to try to convince people that UFOs were real and that we believed that there were a number of them that had crashed, that they'd been recovered by U.S. military forces and intelligence agencies, and that there was an effort underway to try to back engineer them. That we had been working to provide the evidence to each other in conferences regularly held over the last 75 years to gather the information that was persuasive enough to be able to share it with our friends and family and neighbors and others to get them to come on board, understanding this to be true. What we have now reached as of 2017, the morning of December 17th, when the New York Times broke on the front page of the New York Times the fact that there had been for the previous 10 years, from 2007 to 2017 December, a secret program operating inside the United States Pentagon to investigate the UFOs. That broke, and Lou Elizondo, who was the director of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program inside the Pentagon, and Christopher Mellon, who had been the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence under both Bill Clinton and George W. Bush, brought the videos, now well known and well viewed by at least a significant plurality of the people in the country, if not the world, revealing the existence of these three different videos of UFOs. And that began the drumbeat that has led to more and more stories, more and more interviews, and in fact a CBS 60 Minutes report in July of 2022. And so that there's been an entire octave jump in the discussion of this issue as of 2017. What's being reported this morning is potentially offering to have yet another octave jump in this discussion because one of the directors of the secret program inside the Defense Department has come forward and has asserted under oath to the Congress of the United States, the Senate Intelligence Committee, that our United States government has in fact recovered a number of UFO craft that are non-human in their origin, and that this has been kept secret down through the years, and there has been criminal conduct undertaken by people in the executive branch and in the military services and intelligence agencies to actively conceal this information from Congress, intentionally hiding it out inside these special access programs, making them unavailable to the Congress. And now this person has come forward and has stated under oath what his information is, has provided literally hundreds of pages of documented proof to the Congress of the United States, and it has been picked up by the news cycle now. And Elizabeth Vargas in the news, what's this called? News Nation. News Nation has now put this on the internet, and it is anticipated now that Net, or whatever it is, what is it? Nation. News Nation, right. You can see that it's not the New York Times. But the bottom line is that it's likely that the New York Times is going to be picking this up, and CBS 60 Minutes and others will be picking this up. So what we want to do is we want to start our conversation here in the intensive here at the close. This is the final session of the 2023 Contact in the Desert gathering that has fallen on this particular date of the release of this information. And what we want to do is show the news coverage that News Nation has reported, and then we're going to have a discussion. And I'm joined by Richard Dolan. Richard Dolan, as you all know here, is, and I'm Danny Sheehan, if anybody didn't know that. I'm Danny Sheehan, and that I am the President and General Counsel of the Romero Institute here in California that has a fully integrated project, which is the New Paradigm Project, which is devoted to gathering as much of this information as possible and making it available in the most effective possible way to the maximum number of people. And we are also devoted to undertaking the tasks of identifying, asking, and soliciting conversations about the profound questions that are presented to our human family now by this extraordinary set of revelations, which are going to lead very quickly, I believe, to the revelation of the fact that the majority of the people who've been working secretly on these programs inside the Defense Department and intelligence agencies in the United States have formed the operating conclusion that these vehicles are extraterrestrial in their origin. There's been some additional discussion that they display characteristics that might be perceived as being extra-dimensional because they sort of come into full view and can go completely out of full view in a microsecond. And so that there's been discussion about them as well, possibly being even extra-temporal, which means that some people speculate, a smaller number of them speculate, that these may be us from the future that have mastered time travel and have come back to try to warn us, specifically about a thermonuclear war and the destruction of our planet through nuclear war or massive climate change. This has been brought about by the reckless burning of fossil fuels in our planet that has totally disrupted the climatic systems of our planet. Now, but the consensus seems to be inside the agencies that have been secretly studying this and lying to us all about it is that they believe that the highest probability is that these are extraterrestrial. And so this poses to us the issue that was put to us back as early as November 10th of 2009, in which the Catholic Church in Rome, the Vatican, issued an official public statement issued by Father Jose Gabriel Funes, who was the director of the Pontifical Observatory at the behest of then Pope Benedict XVI, not the most progressive of all pontiffs in history, saying that in light of the discovery of more and more of these new exoplanets, it has now become clear that much sooner than had been previously anticipated, our human family is going to discover life elsewhere in the universe. That in light of this fact, this now means that the time has finally arrived for the commencement of an extremely important conversation among the lay people to identify and address the profound philosophical and theological questions posed to our human family by the discovery of life elsewhere in the universe. Now, my having been the legal counsel at the United States Jesuit headquarters for a decade in their social ministry office, which was their public policy office, dealing with legislation and public policy, government policies, I contacted Father Funes and flew to see him and met with him. And he said to me right within minutes of the beginning of our conversation that he said, "Look, Dan, we're not talking here about the discovery of just some simple single-cell life form beneath some frozen sea on some distant moon of a planet in some far galaxy. We're talking about another highly intelligent and highly technologically developed but distinctly non-human species right here on our own Milky Way galaxy. And what we have experienced today is the public announcement by one of the highest level officials in the United States government who was officially tasked with investigating these issues, stating that he is emphatically asserting that, our government has in fact recovered, retrieved, fully intact extraterrestrial vehicles, and that they've been engaged in a campaign of trying to back engineer these. And so that what we want to do today is we want to commence this new phase of our conversation so that we don't have to continue to waste all of our time, or let's say spend most of our time trying to convince other people that this is true, and that we have to turn our unique kind of expertise that has been developed over many decades of many of us working in this field to try to identify and address some of these more profound questions. So what we're going to be doing here is that the reason that I've asked Richard Dolan to be with us here today to participate in this is because Richard, as you know, is the author of what many of us, indeed probably most of us in the field, view to be probably the most authoritative and comprehensive work dealing with the issue of the UFO phenomenon and the national security state. He has spent endless hours pursuing previously classified information through the Freedom of Information Act and other sources to extract the absolutely indisputable government documents that show the existence of these programs and the fact that it's been known inside our military circles for decades that the UFOs are real. And that they thought that they merited a very important investigation. And in a 2-volume work of UFOs in the national security state, Richard has set forth the detailed information that helps verify all of that. And so he is, in fact, one of the most widely respected and most credible sources of information regarding this issue in our entire UFO community. And so I wanted him to be available here together while we're making this announcement, showing this announcement. So what we want to do is show this to you, those of you who have not seen it. It's a short piece, about 15 minutes, to show what it is that's being said. And it's apparently part of a much longer interview that has been conducted by Ross Galbraith, who is the man who interviews the person, whose name is David Grusch. David Grusch is the high-level official who's talking on the record now about this. So we're going to show this now, and it'll be up on the screens here, and then Richard and I will address this. Now, I push the space bar. There we go. Space bar, go. Volume, sound.
Bombshell claims from a military whistleblower. UFO wreckage recovered by the U.S. kept classified by a secret government program for decades. Tonight, a world television exclusive you will only see on News Nation. Welcome to Elizabeth Vargas Reports, earning your trust every night. UFOs exist. The U.S. government found quite a number of them, and they are indeed of non-human origin. Those are the explosive allegations from a former intelligence officer tonight in a whistleblower complaint that the Inspector General is taking very seriously. 36-year-old Air Force veteran David Grusch is exposing what he calls a top-secret military program that has reportedly found wreckage of fully intact UFOs. The government now calls them UAPs, or unidentified anomalous phenomena. For years, there have been whispers and rumors that the government had aircraft of non-human origin. This report is the first evidence it might be true. The Inspector General has called Grusch's complaint urgent and credible. Tonight, we have a world television exclusive interview with the whistleblower in which he claims we not only have the aircraft, but the government has been keeping much of its secret from Congress and from the public. News Nation senior national correspondent Brian Enton is here with the story, and this is a blockbuster.
It is a blockbuster. It's really hard to wrap your mind around this. I've been working on this for the past couple of weeks. I'm still having a hard time processing all of it. Over the last couple of years, it sort of became mainstream to discuss UFOs. The government has released videos. They've acknowledged that we don't know what some of this stuff is out there that we have on camera, but this really takes it all to another level. For the very first time, the world is about to hear from a former high-level U.S. intelligence officer who says the government has some of the unidentified craft in its possession. He is revealing these exclusive details about the secret government program.
If you want to burn fat quickly and improve your overall health, there's one ancient ritual from the Mediterranean that can help. It's been used for centuries to enhance liver.
We're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Oh my gosh, dude. Wow.
We have all seen these blurry videos of unidentified flying objects. Video evidence, if you will, that old tales of UFOs may not all be conspiracy theories. In recent years, Congress starting an official U.S. government Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, recently renamed the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO. And now in a News Nation exclusive, David Grusch, an Air Force veteran, former member of that task force, and veteran of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, is formally blowing the whistle on secrets he says no one has ever shared publicly before.
You are one of the most trusted former intelligence officials in the U.S. defense and intelligence establishment.
Yes, I was.
You were trusted with the most intimate secrets.
Yes.
Grusch sitting down with award-winning investigative journalist Ross Coulthart, who's reporting for News Nation and has spent years reporting on the UFO question.
What conclusion did you come to at the end of your time on the UAP task force?
The UAP task force was refused access to a broad crash retrieval program.
When you say crash retrieval, what do you mean?
These are retrieving non-human origin technical vehicles, call it spacecraft if you will, non-human, exotic origin vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
How many?
Quite a number.
You're kidding.
No. I thought it was totally nuts, and I thought at first I was being deceived. It was a ruse. People started confiding in me. They approached me. I have plenty of current and former senior intelligence officers that came to me, many of which I knew almost my whole career, that confided in me they were a part of a program. They named the program. I've never heard of it. And they told me, based on their oral testimony, and they provided me documents and other proof, that there was, in fact, a program that the UAP task force was not read into.
Grusch alleges the U.S. government has recovered non-human craft for decades. He's filed a whistleblower complaint saying he gave what he calls the classified proof to Congress and the intelligence community inspector general. News Nation has confirmed David Grusch's credentials and resume. We've not seen or verified the alleged proof he says he's provided to investigators. He says he can't show us the proof for national security reasons. He also tells us he's not seen photos of the alleged craft himself, but has talked extensively with other intelligence officials who have.
If you're right, if you're telling us the truth, everyone, the entire American public, has been lied to for decades.
Yeah, there's a sophisticated disinformation campaign targeting the U.S. populace, which is extremely unethical and immoral.
You are saying to the human race, for the first time, an official intelligence representative at a high level from the US government is saying publicly, we are not alone.
We're definitely not alone. Absolutely, the data points empirically that we're not alone, yeah.
Do we have bodies? Do we have species of
Well,
non-human?
naturally, when you recover something that's either landed or crashed, sometimes you encounter dead pilots. And believe it or not, as fantastical as that sounds, it's true.
It's also harder for people to wrap their minds around the concept of a crashed object from somewhere else. It's easier to accept that, yeah, we see things in the sky that we can't explain.
Journalist Leslie Kean broke Grusch's whistleblower story this morning in the debrief. Ms. Kean's career has been mainstream and credible, having written a series of reports on UFOs in the New York Times dating back to 2017. He has the credentials, but there's no documents that he's handed over. There's no pictures. And as a journalist, you want to see documents, you want to see pictures. Does that raise a red flag?
Not at all, Brian. I mean, you mean documents that actually describe the craft?
Correct, yeah, like government documents, or to be able to see it for ourselves.
Of course, don't we all want that? And the problem with that is all of that information is classified. You know, as we said in the story, everything that Grusch told Congress and told the Inspector General of both the IC, the Intelligence Community Inspector General, and the Department of Defense Inspector General, all of that information is classified.
In 2017, Kean reported exclusively in the New York Times that the Pentagon had a secret UFO program. 3 years later, the Pentagon confirmed her story. Her latest report is even more explosive, but Kean says she has multiple sources who back up Grusch's story.
I believe it because of all the sources I have who have told me the same thing. So who am I to doubt these very, very high-level people who have been inside these programs for decades, have done their work, and are all telling me the same thing? I mean, I don't think there's some kind of conspiracy among all these people who don't know each other to make something like this up.
So I've got to be blunt about this. Yeah. You're not making this up. This is not a lie.
No, absolutely not.
It's time to introduce you to the new Patriot Power Generator 2000X. It's our newest solar power.
Because everybody watching this right now is looking at your face. They're going, is this guy for real?
I am for real. And I'm sitting here at great personal risk and obvious professional risk by talking to you today.
And just within the last 10 minutes or so, the Pentagon has released a statement to News Nation about this report. They say to date, AARO has not discovered any verifiable information to substantiate claims that any programs regarding the possession or reverse engineering of extraterrestrial materials have existed in the past or exist currently. AARO is committed to following the data and its investigation wherever it leads. AARO, working with the Office of the General Counsel and the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, has established a safe and secure process for individuals to come forward with information to aid AARO in its congressionally mandated historical review. AARO's historical review of records and testimonies is ongoing and due to Congress by June 2024, and AARO welcomes the opportunity to speak with any former or current employee or contractor who believes they have information relevant to this historical review. And Elizabeth, we know that David Grusch, he's filed that whistleblower complaint. He's been on the record under oath testifying to many of these things that he said in our report tonight.
Right, and it's important to point out that this statement from the Pentagon, from AARO, Grusch is alleging that this top secret program is keeping it a secret from AARO. So.
Yeah, exactly. And if Grusch is, what he's saying is true, you know, the spokespeople, all of those folks at that level wouldn't even know this was going on anyway.
All right, I got to ask you, you know, he has a compelling story to tell. very little of it seems like firsthand knowledge. Isn't he just repeating what somebody else has told him or somebody else has showed him?
Yes, that is what he's doing, but he says he's talked to a number of people who are in very, very high-level positions. He also had basically the highest level of classified material information that he was able to receive. We went back and checked over, you know, his history, all of his credentials. Check out completely. Unfortunately, there's
in addition, a couple people have come forward publicly to vouch for him, people who are high-ranking.
They have, and this article first came out this morning, and I think it's interesting that, you know, there hasn't been any sort of effort to discredit what he has said either from the Defense Department.
So interesting. So what happens, you know, and have we had any reaction, by the way, from members of Congress who have been taking this seriously in the last couple of years? We've seen congressional hearings. We've seen NASA's hearing just about a week ago on UFOs or UAPs, whatever you prefer to call them. We've seen the DNI give a briefing to the White House on this. We've been hearing whispers and rumors for years. I remember even former President Trump, when he was in office, sort of saying, oh my gosh, if you knew what I knew about UFOs.
Yeah.
So there's always been this intrigue.
There has, and think about it, Elizabeth, if you go back 15 or 20 years, if we were sitting here talking about UFOs, people would think that we were nutty. Now it's gotten to the level of where it is somewhat accepted because the government has come forward to a certain extent and acknowledged that there are these videos that exist. The Navy has released the videos themselves and said, we're not sure exactly what this is that we're seeing. Of course, what Grusch is saying really just sort of takes it to the next level.
Boy, it sure does. It's almost impossible to believe. All right, Brian Nenton, thanks so much.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your
What we're going to do is we're going to start a conversation now. Richard and I, we began the conversation right when this was coming on live. Richard and I have been having this ongoing conversation for years now between ourselves and with others. And in light of the fact that this kind of historic event has occurred now, what I'd like to do is have Richard share some of his initial responses to this type of an announcement and what his thoughts are and what kind of questions he thinks we should be addressing now.
Thanks, Danny, for having me on here. Yes. This is your workshop, intensive. I'm just very, very grateful and honored to be part of it. This is a historic day, at least seems like it, and caught us all by surprise, I think. Well, you know, having read the article by Leslie and Ralph that's on the debrief, I'm sure some of you have probably read it also. I'm working mostly off of that information because it's very detailed. It's very interesting. This is a first, I think, that you've got such an explicit statement from an intelligence community insider. So that's important. Explicit statement relating to the acquisition of crashed materials. So that's a first. We've had Lou Elizondo a couple of years ago who also made a statement 3 years ago on the Tucker Carlson show, for example. 4 years, 2019, wow. But that was brief. It wasn't and there was no follow-up on that. So this is a much bigger moment. By the way, keep in mind, we've had now a crash retrieval conversation happening for about half of a century. This actually started coming out in the UFO community in the 1970s. So it's been that long that it's been building. Yes, we knew about Roswell, but that got buried. The whole thing got resurrected only in the 1970s, which is now almost 50 years ago when that whole conversation started. It's taken this long to get it to the level as at now. But in Leslie and Ralph's article, a couple of things struck me as at least noteworthy. A lot of powerful statements, not just by David Grusch, who we saw on the screen here. He was quoted extensively in that article, but there were other individuals. Danny, what was that colonel's name?
Carl Nell.
Carl Nell, who was essentially, I think, Grusch's protector, or at least one of them. Very important. You can probably speak about him since you know him. He made some very, very forthright statements about the reality of crash retrievals. And there was another... Jeff something, I cannot remember his last name. He was interesting, quoted at length, and he said, yes, this is real. These are, certainly not from here. But he also said, and I'm not even faulting him necessarily for this, but he said, well, it's still important that we maintain some secrecy on this. And the reason he pointed out is that the technology that has been studied has been studied for military applications by competitors. So there's the United States. He didn't say the Russians explicitly. He didn't say the Chinese. But, I mean, one assumes that would be an implication, so that there's an international covert Cold War arms race dealing with ET tech. And that's an interesting formal statement. But it is interesting also that he said we need to maintain secrecy. So you can see, like, there's a good justification for the secrecy on that basis, but that can easily open the door for creating a new narrative of controlling this, or a new logic to control the narrative maybe, and release just a little bit of information. So they can now, if you want to continue the idea, as I'm inclined to, that the cover-up is going to continue as long as possible, you could say maybe they're moving the goalposts, giving up a little ground and saying, yeah, this is real. We are looking into it. They do appear to be from somewhere else, but there's still a lot that may not be discussed. Abductions. In the work intensive that I just had a moment ago, we had Linda Moulton-Howe who stopped in, and she says there's cattle mutilations, which is, that's right, check. Cattle mutilations, abductions, and many, many, many other potentials and probable realities of what is going on. There's many layers of what can be disclosed. Many, many layers. Because really what we're talking about is trying to find out what is the full, deep reality of all that this is. There's hundreds, there's thousands of outstanding UFO sightings every year around the world. Around the world. What is that all about? No one's yet talking about that. But that means there's a lot of current activity. What's this activity about? So there's many, many things that remain ahead for us to discuss in order to get to the full truth of what this is about. And I think we were just talking a little earlier, just saying we want to make, as an independent community of researchers and active participants in this, we want to make sure we get a good message out there just to help keep these people honest to as great extent as we can. And also, we want to kind of figure out what we think is going on to get the best sense of that. So there's a lot of work ahead. I've been saying for years, disclosure is not the end of anything. It's the beginning of a whole new fight for truth. And I think we may be looking right down the barrel of that.
Thank you. Well, Richard and I will talk some more about this as we go forward. What I want to do is sort of set this in the context of the intensive that we had previously scheduled was going to be addressing this moment. What I was saying is that as we gather here, on June 5th of 2023, at the Contact in the Desert, this weekend actually constituted a point at which, and various people have commented on it, that this has been kind of a dramatic shift of consciousness, that we have shifted over the course of this weekend from a previous state where we were spending most of our time helping to share information with each other in the kind of UFO community to help each other kind of bolster their individual effort to try to convince their friends and neighbors and family members and others that, in fact, UFOs were real. And that we even thought that some of the UFO craft had crashed or been brought down and had been recovered by our government. And that we wanted to gather the evidence to indicate that they'd actually been involved in some sort of a conscientious program to try to back engineer the technology of these vehicles. And that we were also, a fair amount of attention was being devoted in a lot of these gatherings over the past 75 years to the fact that we were convinced that there was this active suppression program going on, that the Air Force and the Defense Department and the Central Intelligence Agency actually had official programs underway that were covert and clandestine. And in fact, Richard, in his 2-volume work on UFOs in the national security state, actually published some of the documentation that actually shows that there was this active campaign going on to discredit regular citizens. And we're not talking just about high-ranking officers who were threatening to violate their national security oath to reveal this to the media or anything, but these are regular citizens who had seen a UFO, had found a UFO sitting in their backyard, basically, or in a field next to their home, and had witnessed this, and they've taken pictures of them, and they've tried to bring them to authorities, because we've all been trained to trust our government, to believe that our government is working for us, and that if only we could get information to them that showed a reasonable person that these things were real, that they would certainly do something about it. And these people would bring the information to usually to the most available U.S. Air Force base or military base to bring it to them, because we've been trained to not only have a trust in our governmental structures, our civilian governmental structures, but we've been trained to have confidence in our military officials, that they would certainly want to do something about this. I mean, it's their job. That, you know, if there are vehicles flying around in our airspace and coming and going at will, you would think that the Air Force and the other military officials who are charged with national security would want to know about it. But what happened is that these people were being suppressed. They were being threatened, and there was actually a protocol inside the military that if anybody above a certain rank insisted upon pressing forward with a report about a UFO that had kind of credible evidence and information to support it, that they would order that person to go get a psychiatric exam. And we'll touch upon that a little bit later, because it was a lot of ruined careers. Absolutely.
Not just in the military, but in the medical field, psychiatric profession. People lost their licenses, lost their jobs for decades. Yeah, and they would contact people's employer and say, well, you know, this person is reporting UFOs to government officials, going around trying to get government officials to believe there are UFOs flying around, you know, and would terminate their career, ruin their family lives for people. And so that we were devoted in the UFO community to, over and above trying to get people to believe that UFOs were real and that some of them were being recovered, we were trying to get people to understand that there was this active suppression program going on around the country. What we have here now, today, this weekend, we have discovered that now all of a sudden, those major issues are all being officially reported now. And so that what we have to do is we have to shift our gatherings and our attention, our collective attention, into trying to identify and address a number of other questions, the questions that arise now after this has been basically confirmed. Because the bottom line is that the more digging that goes on into David Grusch and what his documentation is and who the people are who came forward and told about this, who he's given the names to the intelligence committees, you know, all they're going to do is get more and more and more verification of the fact that exactly what he's saying is true. And so that we can, I think, from our point of view, as a community that has spent most of our energy trying to prove those things, that we can say, good, that one's underway right now, at least to that extent. And what we can do then is we can turn our attention to attempting to deal with a number of other questions. What I've done is I just want to put out to begin our conversation together some of these things that for example, do we believe as a community that the national security state apparatus that's been set up in our country under the National Security Act of 1947
after World War II that created the CIA and later the NSA and the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, et cetera. Do we believe that, that these people are, in fact, still engaged, certain elements of them, in attempting to suppress this information? And so that do we believe that they are going to do everything they can do to refuse to voluntarily start giving this information up? Just because Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon happens to have brought some videos to the New York Times, or even now that we've got David Grusch bringing documentation and stuff to the U.S. Congress, does our community actually believe that the other people they call the legacy group is actually going to just voluntarily cough this up? I would say no. I think we don't believe that. Are we convinced by the evidence that we hear from David Grusch that they've recovered these vehicles? Absolutely yes. And one of the more problematic issues is, what is the state of our thinking and evidence about this as to whether or not our United States military and intelligence agencies and major defense corporations, have they succeeded to any particular degree in successfully back engineering any of this technology? Have they, for example, figured out what the propulsion system is of these vehicles? We know that these vehicles can come from over 80,000 feet, come in from outer space, and in 0.7 of 1 second can descend from 80,000 feet down to the surface of the oceans and come to a complete dead stop, generating up to 1,300 Gs, which would totally destroy any craft that we've ever seen, and would turn people into mush inside a vehicle like that. And they'll come to a dead stop, they'll go underwater, and then they'll travel at over 100 miles an hour underwater and are monitored by our submarines and their radar. That the bottom line is, do we believe that our government has been able to successfully break that information and know about their navigation system, how they navigate, how they pilot these? Have they mastered the anti-gravity systems of these vehicles? There's discussion has gone on around this, and there are different points of view still inside our community that bear further scrutiny. Michael Schrott has been here over the weekend presenting what he thought was credible information and evidence indicating that he thinks that at least the propulsion system may have been figured out to some extent where they can copy it, because he has reported to us over the weekend that there are a number of craft that don't seem to have some of the sophisticated qualities of the downed UFOs that have been retrieved, but they're more of a kind of I kiddingly kind of referred to them as Home Depot type built UFOs, with exhaust pipes and things hanging out of them, et cetera. One of them was reported to have the undercarriage that looked like the back of a refrigerator. But the bottom line is, this is a question that we need to address, because even if they acknowledge here with Grusch and the others that in fact we've been trying to back engineer these things, the question is, are they going to be willing to acknowledge that they have solved any of these problems and that have actually started creating craft and have any kind of deep black weapon systems that they've developed with this? They're going to bury this inside the unacknowledged special access programs and are going to insist that they have a right to refuse to tell even the Aero group about it, and they're going to refuse to tell the Congress about it because they think that they are entitled to keep this secret because they want to develop and maintain superior military power over our adversaries. So these are some of the questions. Do we believe that whoever is occupying these craft or controlling them. They keep using the term under intelligent control. So it's not entirely clear that that all of these are piloted, though there are many credible reports about bodies having been discovered in the crashed sites. Probably a dozen different cases where they talk about that.
Possibly more, but yeah.
And they describe them variously, but they're pretty consistent. People who've had no contact or communication with each other talk about finding bodies in these crafts that are like 3.5 feet tall, with large heads, as we've all known, large black dark eyes, little slits for nose and a little slit for mouth, no ears, long arms that kind of hang down all the way to their down their legs, with some of them with only 3 fingers on their hands. There are very specific kinds of descriptions going on about that. You do not have the slightest indication that even the people who are involved in trying to push the disclosure right now are willing to try to enter into that discussion. Most of this is focusing on the craft themselves.
That's right, no bodies.
Yeah, they're not going to the body conversation yet.
I don't want to mess up your train of thought,
yes,
but I'd like to just bring up one other dimension to this that we have not yet discussed, which is China and Russia. And it occurs to me, even 5 years ago, there was little question that the United States was still at least trying to maintain its position as the unipolar dominant power on planet Earth. I don't think it can be said credibly that that is the case any longer. And without a doubt, in the last couple of years, the U.S. has lost really key diplomatic relationships with many nations. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, India has been very damaged, Brazil, a lot of the BRICS nations. And what you are seeing is definitely a global movement that is, there's de-dollarization that is happening. The United States may be at its own tipping point in its position geopolitically in the world. And it's kind of an interesting, I don't want to say even coincidence, but an interesting coming together of these powerful facts here, that we're now seeing this UAP, UFO information coming out at the same moment. So now it makes me wonder about the Chinese and the Russians, particularly the Russians, who we know have a very long, involved history of their own dealing with this exact same phenomenon. During most of the history of the Soviet Union, the KGB and Russian intelligence were superb at maintaining information control over that. During the period of the breakup of the Soviet Union, starting in the late 1980s, there were significant leaks of information coming out from within the Soviet Union. And for a couple of years after that, release of the so-called KGB blue files in the early 90s, George Knapp got access to some of those. But then what you saw was a re-establishment of control by the successor of the KGB, that's the FSB. And so I guess I'm just wondering, we're in a state of significant, major geopolitical rivalry now that is actually, I think, worse or more severe than even in the depths of the Cold War that preceded it. And I do wonder what, if any, steps the Russians or the Chinese, who also are rumored and alleged, at least I remember speaking with Sun Shi, who is one of the leading Chinese researchers. It is his belief that China has had at least a couple of crash retrievals, but his information admittedly is a little more sketchy. But they have data, and it's really possible we may not be fully, we Americans may not be fully in charge of this developing story, I guess is all I'm saying.
Yeah. So that there are a whole series of these questions that, given how long we have spent working on these issues, with the government denying it and trying to suppress our activities, that we have come to have a number of insights in what we think is really going on behind that curtain of unconstitutional secrecy that they've engaged in. Okay, in that we actually want to be careful here now to not confuse people out in the more general public who are now going to be turning their attention to try to get more and more information about this. They're going to look to those of us who've been involved in this over the years to get information. And I think we need to be extremely careful in being able to distinguish between what is very solid, very strongly supported evidence, the kind of evidence that you could put in front of a jury. And I come at this basically as a trial lawyer, and having had 50 years in this field, of what kind of proof we could put pursuant to the rules of criminal and civil evidence in front of a jury and have a good faith belief that they're going to conclude that this is true from mere speculation. There's been an awful lot of speculation. Well, when we were in a situation where we had the luxury of still throwing ourselves up against the front brick wall, you know, of the secrecy here, that people could spend a lot of their additional time speculating. But now that we've, in a sense, broken through this wall, and we realize that there's the rest of the world is going to be much more interested in getting reliable information from us, we need to exercise care to make clear where if we're speculating about something, that we say that, okay? And what we are able to, one of the things that we want to do at the Romero Institute with our new paradigm project, which you can start to get information about now. We have the website up, which is Romero Institute, R-O-M-E-R-O, romeroinstitute.org/new paradigm alerts, plural, okay? And that we're going to be providing weekly reports, you know, in conversation with all of our friends and stuff around to start getting reports out to the people who have over the years come to have some confidence in us because of our work on the Pentagon Papers case, the 3 Mile Island case, the Greensboro Civil Rights case, the Karen Silkwood case, the Iran-Contra case, other cases that we've done, that they think that we're fairly credible in the kind of reports that we file. And so that we're going to be trying to provide clear information for people to start increasing the circle of people in our country that now are convinced of the things that we believe there's convincing evidence to support. And that we want to be able to distinguish between this and what are, in fact, speculation. Now,
this is kind of overdue.
Yes.
This is overdue.
This is overdue.
So, yeah.
You know, and we've cast a wide net in the UFO community, and even in a lot of the conferences that we have people who we've been very open-minded and have people come in and present all kinds of information. And we have in the past made some mistakes. There have been some people who've come in and start laying out this kind of, you know, not only speculation, but, you know, clearly duplicitous and false information. And not all of them have been agents of the government. There have been some people who just get carried away, the grandiose attention from audiences, and have made up stuff. I think Corey Goode was an example of one of those. And then, you know, Dave Wilcock got caught on that and started promoting all of that. There have been others who have done things like that. And we have to exercise care now that the whole world is watching our community. And we have to merit a level of credibility that can substitute for, if necessary, but absolutely definitely supplement whatever credible information the government is willing to release about the UFO phenomenon. We need to surround that information with additional information which is highly credible, because that is going to be the only way that we're going to be able to help extract more and more confirmatory information out of the government about these things. Now, in one of the things that has become clear is that there is a kind of a difference in perspective between our UFO community as a whole, at least the plurality of us, and the national security state. Not about the interest that the UFOs have in nuclear issues. I think there's kind of a consensus between us, is that there's a lot of activity that began as early as the Trinity site, experiments with atomic explosions back in 1945 in July, with a lot of UFOs being sighted around and monitoring what was going on. And as I pointed out in my first talk, that Colonel Corso, Philip Corso, actually left a little 8mm home movie to be shown to his grandchildren only after he died, which I've seen, where he tells his grandchildren that he was one of the security officers there at Yucca Flats at White Sands when we were experimenting with the initial detonations of nuclear bombs. And he actually took a lunch break and went out to away from the normal site to have a lunch with some sandwiches he brought. And he went over by this place where there was a old mine and ran into a UFO that was down. And it turns out that because of the massive array of radar facilities that we had around the test site, that it had interfered in the navigation system of this UFO. And he recounts to his grandchildren how he had a mental telepathic communication with them, and they pleaded with him to exercise whatever authority he might have to get them to turn off the radar so they could escape. And he actually did it. He actually went back and talked them into shutting it off for a while, and then he saw you could see it shoot away like that. And so this interest in our nuclear program has been consistently evidenced in information that we've gathered within our community. And what we're discovering is that the information that's inside the secret studies of the government, they too have taken note of the fact that these UFOs tend to congregate around nuclear weapons facilities. For example, at Roswell in July of 1947, that was the 501 bomber group, which was the only bomber group on the planet that had nuclear weapons. And that's where the Roswell crash occurred. These sightings that you've heard about on the front page of the New York Times in 2017, it was a lot of UFO activity around our nuclear aircraft carrier groups, et cetera. And so that this interest they have has caused those of us in the UFO community to respond by saying, see, these beings are really worried about the nuclear weapons program, that we can destroy ourselves with this. And there have been reports, numerous reports, of people who we've concluded sincerely believe that they've had face-to-face encounters with UFO occupants that have landed and been in direct communication with people face-to-face, where the people have been told telepathically that the UFO beings are extraordinarily worried and concerned about our development of nuclear weapons, that we are threatening to destroy the entire life-generating capacity of our planet, that our planet is not entirely unique, but our planet is one of the comparatively rare planets in our galaxy that actually gestates life, and that this is under threat from a potential massive thermonuclear exchange. And they've similarly expressed concern about the burning of petroleum and fossil fuels that have contaminated. They kept referring to it as contamination. We're contaminating our whole planet and ruining our climate system. Now, that's how we have understood it inside our community. Now, the people in the military national security state, when they see these objects hovering around our nuclear sites and our nuclear submarines and our nuclear aircraft carriers, they view this as a threat. They say, oh, look, there's a foreign potential adversary, gaining intelligence about our operations. And so that they have responded in a way of now constantly talking about the UFOs being some kind of a threat. And they've additionally developed an entirely new kind of sophisticated line of analysis, is that, in order to get Congress to do anything about helping in the disclosure of the UFO phenomenon, which they profess to be interested in, and not unconvincingly, that if we tell the Congress that this is a threat to our national security and that they're spying on our nuclear facilities, et cetera, that'll get these elected representatives more interested in it, and they'll do something about it. So we've had a lot of those conversations with the folks that are engaged in this process. So I think that our community has, in fact, formed an opinion that at least some of these UFO vehicles and their occupants, or the intelligence functioning behind them, this non-human intelligence that they're referring to, does actually seem to express some concern about our species destroying ourselves and expressing concern that we are polluting our whole planet. And more importantly, they probably may be more concerned about our planet than they are us.
That's totally possible. I've been researching water-based UFOs for the last year. A number of cases I looked at from Brazil within the Amazon basin, and one of the things that I noticed on a few occasions were that these objects were seen in some of the most ecologically rich and diverse areas on the entire planet. I don't think it's a coincidence that they would be hanging around there. I would absolutely have to conclude that they were there for that reason. They were just, examining these rich life-giving areas. So I do think.
So they may actually be, helping to seed other planets, in our galaxy with life that is generated by our planet, making our planet an extraordinarily valuable resource for living species in our galaxy, among other planets. But this is some more speculation, and we don't want to get carried away because such a high percentage of our people are kind of anti-war or anti-nuclear weapons, et cetera. We want to try to be as objective as we can about understanding this. But in any event, there does seem to be a special level of interest that these UFO phenomena display toward our nuclear weapons program. Now, the questions that we need to ask ourselves are very pointed, that are, in our judgment, are not likely to be confronted or addressed in any of the information that the government is willing to release to us. And one of these primary things of concern is the issue of the abductions. That one of the major features of abductions, or one of the features of the UFO phenomenon, at least since 1954 or so, in the Barney Hill and Betty Hill example, where they talked about actually being involuntarily taken aboard the craft. That's come to be kind of a major feature of the UFO phenomenon now, is that it's the people who have accounts of having been awakened in the middle of the night and find these kind of interesting little UFO people in their room, and they pick them up and take them through the walls and bring them to their craft and examine them, etc. So the abduction phenomenon itself is one that my experience in talking with a lot of these folks that you're seeing here today and at other times, that they don't want to go near that subject. They're saying, look, we're going to talk about the existence of the craft, even the fact that they may be non-human intelligences behind the craft, etc. But they're not going to cross over into this area of the fact that human beings are being involuntarily taken into custody by them.
It's a huge can of worms, and I'll just point out, I think it's a lot more complicated than I would have thought even a couple of years ago. Tracy and I were doing a fair amount of abduction research on our own in the last year, having spoken with particularly Tracy, but I was allowed to be a part of it, a number of individuals who had experiences. Not all of them were with gray aliens. Some were with totally human-looking beings, going back to the 1950s, involving telepathic contact, 5-year-old boys going out of their house at night across the street to an old shed to meet with these two very nice blonde male and female who he met with for years. We interviewed this man at great length, and his wife, absolutely honest man. There's not a shred of doubt in our mind. And this went on for a long time with him, and he's not the only one. There's so much going on with this whole concept of abduction, being taken, and thank you. So it's going to be a lot to unpack that all, to sort out the tangled threads that this phenomenon is. I think some of it, yes, does seem to point to gray-type aliens abducting people to create hybrids of some sort. That's an agenda. I think there's multiple agendas going on with that, and it can get complicated.
So what we're saying is that we, I think, in the kind of civilian UFO community, have to turn a lot of our attention to some of these areas that we have a very good reason for believing that any disclosure process that is going to be undertaken on the part of our government authorities are not going to want to touch at all. And so while at one and the same time we're trying to stimulate them and do everything we can do to reveal as much as we can get them to reveal, there's going to be other information that we're going to have to really be the primary mover of this information into the public, and so that we want to begin to exercise a great deal of responsibility and care. And so that we want to bring in additional experts who now may be much more available for us than have been available down through the years, to come in and try to figure some of these things out, even without the affirmation of the government to be involved with this. Now, one of the extraordinarily important questions that we're going to need to ask as a civilian population is, whether or not there's any evidence of our government officials having any direct communications with this intelligence behind the UFO phenomenon. Because it's extraordinarily difficult to believe that with the number of instances of the UFO sightings and landings and recovered craft and recovered bodies that the evidence seems to support, that our United States government would not have taken active steps to be able to establish communication with the intelligence behind these vehicles, to try to communicate with them, to have some kind of a discussion with them. And so that this is very important, because from a legal point of view and a juridical point of view, one would assume that these type of conversations would not only have been undertaken, but they should lead to some sort of understanding.
An agreement or even a treaty.
Yeah, some kind of an agreement or some kind of a treaty. And the question that arises is, when you have a treaty like that, what is it what are the benefits that would have been understood on either side of the treaty negotiation that they were after? What is it that the intelligences behind the UFO phenomenon might want to get our government officials to agree to not interfere with them doing? What are the kind of things that we might, or at least the people that run our government might, insist upon trying to extract from them? Now you remember that Philip Corso, Colonel Corso, following the Roswell crash, he wrote this book called The Day After Roswell, and he asserts in that book that he was in a very high-level position in the United States Pentagon, in charge of the development, the ascertaining and development of foreign technology. And he asserts that he was put into possession, following Roswell, of some of the technology that was recovered from the Roswell crash. He asserts that actually the night vision technology that our United States military exercises now, which you see all kinds of stuff on the news of them running around seeing everybody looking green at night, that technology came from the Roswell crash. He asserts that, in fact, the microchip, the actual silicon chips, came from the Roswell crash, that kind of spurred the entire computer generation, even up onto the AI stuff that came from there. Now, one of the things you don't hear so much about, very interestingly, is he asserted that one of the technologies that was recovered from the craft that he was put into possession of was a helmet that was actually apparently worn by the pilot of the Roswell UFO, which they believed that was a means of navigating and piloting the craft, that the craft apparently may have been run by telepathy.
Or brain-computer interface, a BCI. possibly.
And so these are things that it's possible that the people in the military have been seeking access to some of the technology that they have, because there does seem to be an inordinate fixation on the part of the military-industrial complex on focusing on the technology of these vehicles, in that they view that as another reason for maintaining the secrecy, because they would like to be able to get a competitive advantage over their perennial adversaries, and their perennial adversaries on our planet vary from time to time. That it could be Russia at one time, China at another time, it's Iran at another time, it could be, somebody in South America at another time, and so the state of development that our human family is in, that we still seem to be trapped in this dialectical second paradigm worldview, where we seem to derive our sense of self-definition in conflict with an ultimate other. And that the danger, of course, is that would start to happen now. As soon as the military-industrial complex encountered a foreign intelligence from another planet, another star system, that they would instantaneously start to organize themselves and structure themselves in an adversarial position vis-a-vis them. And yet, as Lou Elizondo has said many times, one of the things that baffled him the most when he was the head of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Project inside the Pentagon, he said when he would go to these high-level military officials and report to them the kind of information that he was getting about the existence of these UFO vehicles and the kind of many kind of occasions on which they would be sighted, he said they did not seem to respond as though that was a threat at all. They just seemed to be more or less indifferent to it. And he was buffaloed by that. He couldn't understand why they wouldn't perceive it as an adversary threat of some sort. And it could have something to do with some type of potential détente or relationship that has evolved with our government officials. So these are the kind of things that they would very much want to keep secret from us.
Along those lines, just to support that,
yeah.
When you look at the history of alleged crash retrievals of UFOs, there's a lot for the 20th century. There's not a lot for the 21st. There are alleged cases, but there hasn't been any kind of slam dunk that we really can talk about for the 21st century, unlike many for earlier. And one possibility that I wonder is if there was some of those earlier ones weren't just crashes, as we had talked about earlier, but actual shoot-downs or victims of hostile intent, and perhaps that has been altered in recent decades. It's just a possibility.
And so these are things now to inquire into these areas. It's going to require a comparatively high level of sophistication to do some of these analyses. It's going to call upon us to have experts that are in the fields of geopolitics and social sciences, et cetera. And so that the UFO community up until this point in time has been made up very largely of regular people, who are really upset or interested in this issue or who had some kind of a sighting experience. And it has lacked the highest levels of sophistication in scientific expertise and others. In fact, Eric Weinstein, who's a PhD math graduate from Harvard University, has been quite distressed about this and has been quite vocal about it. He said, this is remarkable. He says, I know many of the people that are involved in the highest levels of academic study, including at the Princeton Center for Advanced Research, et cetera. None of these people are briefed in on this program. None of them have been brought in to try to figure these things out because the military has locked them out, has refused to admit that any of this is going on, and the only people that have been involved in these deep black programs, these unacknowledged special access programs, are like engineers. They're just trying to back engineer these craft so they can get some kind of military advantage. And all the rest of the areas of academic inquiry have been ignored. So So these are just a series of some of the more obvious questions that we have already come to have a fairly good opinion about inside the UFO civilian community. And what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to sharpen our thinking about these things and be prepared to offer this. Go ahead.
I didn't know where your next sentence was going there. So. There may be an opportunity to have some questions here, and if so, I can.
Where are we at?
I can go into the. I do not know, but I can go in the audience. I've got a microphone here.
Yeah, we're up to almost 6 o'clock.
Just letting you know that that's a possibility. We can do that.
Yeah. Well, let me do a couple of things first. Let me trigger some questions here that I think are going to be pretty obvious to us. First of all, one of the main questions is ought we to direct very much attention into these kind of more esoteric, philosophical, theological, kind of metaphysical questions that we would have, having to do with our place as a human family in the galaxy and in the universe? Ought we not to focus ourselves on more kind of what we call kitchen table issues or bread and butter questions that we have? For example, things where the list of them, I've kind of put together a whole list of these immediate questions that are going to come up once you get past the question of whether these things are real, and that is, for example, where'd it go here? Number one is like where do you come from? You know, I mean, that's kind of one of the first. That's Betty Hill. Well, where do you guys come from? You know, have you guys been coming here for very long? You know, how long you've been coming here? You know, what's the story I hear about people being kidnapped and stuff? Are you guys going to tell us about this? You know, what's your civilization like? You know, how old is your civilization? How long have you had to develop technology and things? These are some very immediate questions that people would have to place to them, but and a lot of people will have those immediate questions. But those of us who are in the UFO community, I think that we need to really direct some significant portion of our thinking into these more sophisticated areas of what are the philosophical implications of our place in the universe. What kind of impact would this have on developing a new worldview? Having an entire new paradigm human worldview that would integrate into our previous worldviews and amend them to take account of a different place that we have in the universe. These are extraordinarily important questions that we're going to have to come. No, I've got about 3 of them here. I just, but anyway, there's a whole series of questions that are going to come up. And so that what we do is so we've had about an hour now, and so that it's Richard's much better at this than I am of asking people lots of questions. So let's have some questions, and then
I'll go into the audience so people can use this microphone, and we can hear them. And let me go across this way here.
It's important to understand this is being recorded now. And this is going to be, the Contact Undead is going to be making this available. We'll have copies of it at the New Paradigm Project from the Romero Institute. And so we're hoping to kind of have a reasonable conversation about this. And let's not spend a lot of time just throwing out wild speculation, things that are going to have people say, look, people are nutcases here. Okay?
So right. How about we like the way we do it in panels when people want to ask questions? Maybe we can have them line up.
Sure. What
do you think? Is that okay, guys? You want to ask a question? Alan's in front. He got here first, and anyone else can just line up. And I'm going to give Alan the microphone, and you can have at it.
Hold it up close.
Sure.
Guys,
we are at such a momentous time in history, in human history, that this is the paradigm shift. This is what the Romero Institute has been preparing for, this worldview change. But what's implied in the UFO phenomenon, what we see with alien abductions especially, it's not happening in this reality. our concepts of time and space and who we actually are as human beings. That's the shift of paradigm. That's not just that aliens are here, but how are they here? What is this interface? Because if they could come in and out of our world, hypnotize people, make them forget, take their bodies someplace else, there's something more to reality than we've been force-fed and conditioned to think. So this is the real resistance of government. It's what Timothy Leary used to say about LSD. It's not that it was harmful, it's just that you think differently than other people. Not to promote LSD. But we will be thinking differently than other people because we acknowledge there's more to reality than we've been told, and this is the government's resistance. That's my opinion. Any comments?
Thanks. Alan, do you take
Sure.
that?
I would say this, is that what we're going to have to do here is that this is one of the things that I learned when I went to the Jesuit headquarters. You know, I would go out with Father Bill Davis and others, and we'd be talking to citizen groups and stuff, and he'd be talking to them about Latin America and some of the American policies and stuff like this. And it always struck me that he was being way too gentle about American policy. You know, he was asking questions about, you know, did people think that maybe we were supportive of, you know, some of these dictatorial regimes. And, you know, I would get totally frustrated. I would start jumping up and down and say, what are we talking about? We all know what they're doing. Why don't we just tell the people all about this? Because what happens is people raise up shields immediately. And so what I'm talking about, what we have to try to develop here is an ability to start sharing information with people and understanding, like in a Sufi poem has like 4 or 5 different levels at which it can be understood. You have to program what it is you're saying in a way where people at different levels of understanding can get adequate information without just overloading everybody at once. So that's the thing. So that this whole thing about this is some completely alternative dimension of reality where we don't have any footing, any grounding, any kind of understanding of what's going on. You don't want to necessarily just throw somebody completely right into the ocean if they don't even know which way is up or down.
I just want to say, I think Alan has a fantastic point, which is like this phenomenon is going to threaten to overturn our whole reality. But I see where you're coming from, too. You're like, hey, one step at a time. We've got to ease into this ocean. That's, I think, Danny's.
There's a rude awakening coming to humanity, and either they're ready for it or they're not. Just like these abductees, it's a rude awakening. So let's just brace ourselves. Let's throw it all out on the table. Let's government out there, and then let's tell them how reality is not what we thought it was. And then we've made a revolution. Go ahead.
Make it happen.
So I want to congratulate you on your penultimate capitalization. And I also want to present, as you know, I work with the astronaut Gordon Cooper, was the great pioneer in outer space on UFOs, and he wrote this in his final book, Leap of Faith, quote, and I think this is very relevant for what you just said. But as I see it, our government is now trapped in a big box of old lies. It's going to take a lot of courage on the part of some future administration to say, quote, folks, our government has been lying to you all these years. Now we're going to come clean and tell you the real truth. As I said, that's going to take a lot of courage, something that doesn't seem to be in surplus of in Washington these days, quote unquote. Yep. So Gordy and I worked behind the scenes. I was involved in crash retrievals. I made major announcements to the press, world press in Mexico City in 1979, a smoking gun that was not covered in the United States. All I can say, this is the time to go ahead. Clear out the smoke. Keep up your great work, you and Richard. God bless.
Thank you, Doug. Thanks, JJ.
Actually, you guys talked earlier about the importance that aliens really do not like nuclear weapons. And even though I think, of course, what Grusch was saying, he's pointing probably to evidence from the 40s, 50s, 60s, maybe even in recent times, I couldn't think that this would not happen if they really do come out with things at a better time, because we are at the verge of so much chaos right now and possible nuclear weapons of war taking place maybe in the next year or two or even sooner. So let's hope if we move, like Ronald Reagan said, you know, we would all be more peaceful if we realized that we were not alone in the universe. I didn't quote him properly, but maybe you can, Richard.
What a great point, Desiree. We are in a very dangerous place in the world right now, and it's potentially perfect timing for us to get this larger picture out. Did you want to say anything, Danny? Or?
Yeah. I
Maybe
think
no coincidence.
It's twofold. You know, this is a delicate issue because when you're having a person like Ronald Reagan be talking about the great benefits of having a discovery that there's an extraterrestrial civilization, you might get the sense that what he's really talking about is that let's gird our loins and all come together and form a huge military alliance over and against them. Whereas instead of transcending our wars with each other and wars with them and ascending into a more unitive state of consciousness, I think that we're going to have to enlist everybody. Every single aspect of our human culture has to be involved in this conversation, not excluding the military, not excluding national security people. But the bottom line is that in the churches, even though I think it's a canard, you know, that people go into about, oh, you know, the churches are going to be freaking out just like, you know, the Catholic Church did when Galileo tried to tell them that the earth wasn't in the center of the universe. The fact of the matter is the Catholic Church is leaning very much forward into this, trying to solicit this type of a conversation for people to become involved, to share our insights into what we think we ought to adjust our thinking about. So I think that we need to be very careful here. Now, I'm just striking a note here of saying that I'm not an advocate of withholding information. I mean, but the fact of the matter is we have to be layering the information in and as aggressive and as effective a way as we possibly can so it can be heard, so that it can be heard in an effective way. That's why we all have to participate in figuring out together how we go about doing this.
I'll just chime in and say I think I agree with you. You can't lead if there are no followers. You have to have, you've got to bring, if you're at position 10 on the spectrum, but the public is at position 2, you probably can't start with position number 10. You probably have to bring people in. I'm just, just support that.
Thank you. I apologize for not knowing, but did this break today?
Yes.
So then today is an historic day for all of us. And,
right.
Again, I thank you all. But my crazy little, like blue sky Pollyanna question is, now what do we do? I mean, like, no, seriously, like, do we, I mean, like, how do we get the House and the Senate to basically give us the truth on the things that, what agreement? Was it Eisenhower? I don't know. Like, what agreement has been made? And now, what do we do? It's like, what do we do? What do you guys do? How do we get the effing truth?
We have to lean forward. We have to lean forward into this, and we have to be considerate. We have to be polite. We have to be caring about our fellow human beings. And what we want to do, I think, above all things, is not descend into a dialectic where we are characterizing people that don't agree with us as bad guys, and that, we're all good guys, there's all these bad guys. That what we have to do is try to transcend this will to the dialectic in trying to kind of create a conflict in order to try to get attention. That I think that what we've got to do is keep coming forward with positive information, positive energy. That's why we've set up the New Paradigm project at the Romero Institute. We've spent 50 years developing relationships with media people, with civil organizations, unions, with legislatures, et cetera. So we're going to try to do everything that we can possibly do. Each one of us finding ourselves where we are in this process need to consider whether we're going to make this a top priority in our lives. That's one of the things we're talking about doing at our institute. We've been involved in an awful lot of things. We've been doing an awful lot of work on legislation lately. As you know, we worked on the Dakota Access Pipeline. We defended Chase Iron Eyes, who the Tiger Swan Private Military Corporation designated as the leader of the Indian uprising against the Dakota Access Pipeline. But we've felt that this is so important an issue that we need to establish a co-equal program in our institute. to go along with the global climate change issues, the Native American issues, the national security state issues. This is one that we're going to be devoting ourselves to, and we would like to get the cooperation and participation of everybody that we can, and we want to offer our participation with everybody who's trying to get this done. So that's why I'm just recommending that people get in touch with us at romeroinstitute.org/new paradigm alerts. Okay, and so that we can all help share information, open source information on this with everybody.
Fantastic.
We've got your backs. Thank you. 9.5 out of 10 importance.
Thanks for that question. Yeah, great.
Thank you. In true ditto fashion, I guess all I can do is repeat what was said above. There's one first thing I'd like to mention is that I think it would be very important for the ufology community to try and position itself as being a civilian spokes group for 8 billion people on planet Earth, rather than from a particular national state perspective. And if we keep that in the back of our mission statement, that I think puts us maybe in the right direction. Secondly, I would hope that we would be able to recruit some professional people who have devoted their lives and careers to this kind of diplomatic, quote, foreign policy, unquote, perspective, like Alexander Wendt at, Ohio State University. And there's a think tank in Ontario, Waterloo, Ontario, CIGI, C-I-G-I, which has devoted its whole background to looking at space governance. And space governance is where we're starting to move with a diplomatic strategic outlook. Yeah. And I guess thirdly, not trying to mimic Linda Moulton Howell's approach, but I have it on good authority that at least the Five Eyes countries, United States, Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, and a few other countries, have in fact for decades had people on the inner circles who have been studying preparedness planning for this kind of splash, not drip drip, but splash disclosure that we've experienced today. And that they have not only been working among themselves, but have been doing this with the cooperation of certain non-intelligent,
non-human intelligence.
Yeah, aliens with alien groups. And therefore, anything that we would do from a global perspective, from a more international perspective, we better touch base with whomever has been working on these inner circles, because as you've mentioned, Richard, we are in a geopolitical mess, and it is probably one of the most dangerous situations that I've experienced in my 80-some years. And I think that what we can do as a community to backfill, provide more information on disclosure that is, I don't think, ever going to come out in a full 100% picture from any U.S. government or any Five Eyes government or whatever. But we have a tremendously important role as people who are knowledgeable to some degrees, unlike me, informed on this esoteric topic. And we have a very, very, very important role to do. And I'm just flabbergasted that I had the good luck to be the right place, the right time, with the right people. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I would like to point out, I hope I'm not out of line, this gentleman is a retired diplomat from the great nation of Canada.
Yes.
I think very wise words. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
No,
David?
that's fine.
All right, we'll bring the next questions here.
Thank you very much. So I guess we're learning this now as the consequence of...
Hold it right up your mouth.
Okay. I guess we're learning this now as the consequence of a conflict between factions, which you outlined earlier. So some people wanting to disclose and some people resisting it. I was wondering if you could flesh out any details on that, what the actors involved, their motivations, do they have the feeling to go the distance on it? How do you think, any details on that would interest me? Thank you.
I can say a little bit about it. That for those of you who were at the panel, the disclosure panel the other night, I was attempting to say something like this, is that it's important to understand that so let's start with this, that as I talked about in the second presentation that I made, that when our human family is confronted with a major public policy challenge that we have here, that our human family tends to divide ourselves into constituency groups, and that there's a whole octave of these. And you recognize them by their political philosophy of authoritarian, reactionary, conservative, moderate, liberal, progressive, and utopianist. These are the kind of classic sociological identifications of these adherents to worldview.
Can we add utopian, totalitarian, just to complete that circle? Just
yeah. Well, we've been running into some of that. But what I'm saying is that what we need to do is we need to try to get all of the adherents to these particular worldviews coming forward in participating in this discussion. And what's happened is up until this particular point, there's been a perceived dialectic going on between the quote UFO community and the national security state community, and that each of them are caricaturizing each other. I mean, I've been in conversations with participants in both groups, and the UFO community tends to view all the people in the national security state stuff as fascists, as either authoritarians or reactionary Nazis. And the people inside the national security state infrastructure tend to view the UFO people as tinfoil hat loonies, and that is not constructive. And that is not really the dynamic that is engineering these developments of the revelations that are taking place. What's going on is there are participants within the national security state who are true authoritarians, and they're true reactionaries, but there are a lot of rather traditional conservatives that are in there, and actually a number of moderates that are in there. Quite rarely do you run into very advanced people in the military who consider themselves to be liberals. It's not an environment that is particularly conducive to that. And there's virtually no progressives. And so there's a threat of it looking like it's kind of a dialectic between everybody to the left of center and everybody to the right of center, but that's still just a false dialectic. So what I'm saying is that what I've seen happening is that these events of today that have taken place are really going on between elements in the national security state infrastructure that are basically conservative and moderate, working in some kind of tension to the people who are really reactionary. There's very limited number of raw authoritarians that are even in the military. They tend to weed those people out. So that the dynamic that's really going on is between the reactionaries who are dedicated to wanting to have an adversary in whether it's Russia or China. They want to be able to develop these just as weapons and keep them secret. But the conservatives and moderates are aware of the fact that this needs to be shared and that they're over-protecting this information. And so the people that you're seeing coming forward today in these articles are comparatively moderate people inside the national security state infrastructure. Now, they themselves don't want everything just thrown out on the table, like Alan was suggesting, and I know that that Linda Moulton Howe was suggesting. That let's just drop it right on everybody and just let everybody get stunned and shocked and recover from it. You know, that they don't believe that that's the best way to go, and I don't think that that most liberals would want that to happen. I think that even most progressives would be somewhat circumspect about doing that. It may be kind of a utopianist vision to do something like that, but unless a utopianist vision, in my judgment, has a metaphysical, philosophical, and even theological grounding of what the alternative worldview is going to be for people to adhere to, it's going to be very disruptive and dangerous, I think, for people to get carried away about just splashing all of this right on top of everybody. So we're going to have to participate responsibly in this discussion of how we roll out this information. That's my opinion. So I think that we have to do it that way, and that's what you see happening here. This is a fairly moderate rollout that's starting here today.
Since we are a very litigious, I believe is in their
Pardon?
society, we are a litigious society.
Litigious society. Yes.
You know, you guys, lawyers.
Yeah.
Since it seems that there'll be a lot of digging and investigations involved with this whole process, especially because of today, will not the information, if it's released by the government that they have covered up certain things, yes, does that give the people who are damaged, whose careers have been destroyed, does that give them standing to process, to bring in the legal litigation? You know what I'm saying.
One of the challenges is that the federal government that was created by the Constitution in 1789, and then with the amendments in 1791, even though they postured and insisted that they were eschewing and pushing away the desire to be monarchs and sovereigns, they did retain the right of sovereign immunity for the government. And that if, in fact, you believe that there's an official policy going on inside the United States government and engaging in inflicting any kind of damages against individuals, they're going to initially invoke the doctrine of sovereign immunity, okay, and say that sui sponte, that they don't have to acknowledge anything, they don't have to grant standing to anybody to sue them unless you can get in under the umbrella of what they call the Federal Tort Claims Act. The Federal Tort Claims Act is a statute that was passed by Congress that says that if in fact you are damaged by activities of people inside the government that are acting within the scope of their authority, you can file a lawsuit under what they call the doctrine of respondeat superior. Is that, like, for example, if someone driving an army truck down the street runs over your kid, you can sue them like you could sue anybody else, except you can't get any jury and you can't get any punitive damages, and you can't get anything except the financial money that you lost. No such thing as just, you know, a mean and tortious activity. So it's a very limited source of relief, and they only cover the kind of garden variety common law types of tort offenses. So that if you're arguing, for example, in the Iran-Contra case, where we filed a major federal criminal racketeering act lawsuit against the people in the enterprise, All the people that we named were people who were retired and no longer functioning as government officials. And so if you were to do that, in this case, most of the people who engaged in the kind of heinous conduct that we're talking about here were functioning in their official government capacity. And they're going to invoke sovereign immunity, and they're going to, so that there's going to have, it would have to be a lot of creative litigating going on. And the problem is, no matter how creative you were in your litigative strategy, you bring the action in a federal district court, and all those judges are appointed by the political officials in the government. And the reality is that they're going to resist mightily your effectiveness in getting any kind of litigation done against these people. And so that you really have to generate a groundswell of citizen movement and demands, and you have to direct them to the legislature, and you have to get the legislature to take action against them. One of the reasons why the Romero Institute is being involved in this is to answer questions just like this, to try to determine whether or not there are any litigative strategies. But the problem is, the minute you start formulating litigative strategies against them, you've dropped into the dialectic, and they're going to view you as an enemy. And you aren't going to be able to get any kind of cooperation from them. You aren't going to get any kind of reasonable response on their part. And so that it's basically self-defeating to try to start that line down, because you don't ever have any realistic expectation the judicial system is going to do anything about it. But it's something that needs to be contemplated. But we don't want to burn all of our bridges into the Congress, into the legislature. In the Karen Silkwood case, for example, Peter Stockton, who was the congressional investigator in the case, said, oh, the minute you guys file a federal lawsuit, Congress isn't going to have anything more to do with this. Yeah. Congress is not going to continue functioning and to do things that might benefit you in your private litigation, so they're not going to do it. So I would not recommend the litigation route at this stage.
Just to add in support of that, I remember getting an email about a decade or more ago from some man who was deep on the inside, and he said, I just read your book, After Disclosure. Good book, but you are missing the importance of all of those of us who know a great amount of information. He said, we are never, ever going to give up any information about this unless we know that we are going to be immune from any kind of prosecution. And that's something, I've always thought about. Once you start litigating, like, there's not just government people who now have whistleblower protection with Arrow, but there's a huge number of military contractors, defense people in the industry, and who probably have crucial information that we will want to have. And we have to make the government, the people will have to make a decision, how punitive do you want to be if you want to get certain information you need. So there's that.
Yeah, we have to look to the South Africa solution of setting up these councils to try to figure out how to negotiate our way through this thing.
Hello, so I'm the founder of a couple startups, and one of them is called the Consciousness Project, where I'm researching different aspects of consciousness with the mission to uncover the truth. And one of the platforms that I have been surprisingly mind blown with the content on there has been TikTok. And now, there's millions of whistleblowers on that platform, and now the government wants to ban it. And just on Facebook alone, I go to Facebook jail all the time. So my question for you is, what are your thoughts on the government's mission to ban freedom of speech, and what can we do about it?
Well, that's extremely important. When the brouhaha started about all this stuff around the platforms and people being canceled and thrown off Facebook and banned from Twitter and all of that stuff that's been going on, the whole cancel culture thing. Obviously, I started getting lots of inquiries and phone calls, and have had conversations with any number of people that have been canceled. And the bottom line is that I'm in this kind of peculiar position because I actually litigated the case for the New York Times against the Jewish Defense League. The Jewish Defense League, Meir Kahane, brought an action against the New York Times back in 1973. 72 it was. The Meir Kahane sent in a full-page ad in the New York Times, just pissing on Leonard Bernstein, who was the conductor of the Philharmonic Orchestra in New York City, because he had given a contribution to the Black Panther Defense Fund in the Panther 21 case. I was at the firm that represented the New York Times. I also happened to have been one of the defense attorneys for the Panther bombing conspiracy defendants, and so I was in kind of an interesting position there. So I ended up doing the litigation and took the position that the New York Times, as a matter of First Amendment, had a right to decide whether it was going to publish something like that or not. You know, that they couldn't be compelled. They weren't like a television station or a radio station where they were limited bandwidth, where the federal communications law could give the government jurisdiction to regulate the content of televisions. Shows that they could have a fair comment rule or an equal time rule that they had in television and radio. And so that I argued that the New York Times had a First Amendment right to reject any requested public part of their publication, which we won, correctly so. On the other hand, I got approached by Bobby Kennedy, Jr., and others who had been canceled off Facebook and asked if I would help litigate the case against Facebook and others. And that you dig down into this thing and really understand that the United States Congress has passed a law, a public law, it's 230. Public Law 230, it has an A and a B part. In the A part, it said, because of the extraordinarily important interest that our people have in having open conversations and dialogue on this new technology of the internet, what we want to do is we want to pass a special law exempting these platforms like TikTok and Facebook and Twitter and the others that are on the internet, exempt them from the normal rules of legal liability for libel and slander. Because the rule was, under common law, any publication or republication of a libel or a slander, that the publisher is legally liable for multiplying that libel or slander. And so that it would have made it impossible for the platforms to carry open banter back and forth between people and among people. The chats, they wouldn't have been possible, because anytime anybody said something, you know, calling someone other some kind of a name or accusing them of something, they would be equally liable. And so the Congress came together and they passed Public Law 230, and Part A exonerated the platforms from the normal common law standards of legal liability for libel and slander. But however, they put in a Part B, and they said, in light of the fact that we've extended this important, unique privilege to you in this exemption from the normal operation of the common law laws of libel and slander, we want to make it clear that you have the authority to choose to censor the following areas. Number one, any kind of child pornography. Number two, any kind of gratuitous, gross violence. Number three, any areas that would normally be considered to be obscene. And number four is anything that you personally find to be offensive. And then number five is said, anything that you decide you don't want to publish, even if it's otherwise protected under the First Amendment. Okay, so what you had is a statute basically telling a group to whom they had extended the unique privilege of being exempt from the application of the rules of libel and slander, explicitly authorizing them to censor First Amendment protected speech. And they were being, quote, allegedly given this authority by Part B of Public Law 230 by the federal government. Now, one would normally think that that's government action in clear, raw form, you know, of the government taking action to censor information. The reality is, under the previous case of the Jewish Defense League versus the New York Times, they had that right anyhow. Okay? And so the government wasn't giving them anything. except what it was doing is it was signaling them that they wanted them to censor this stuff. And then what you got on top of that, in these particular cases, you got government officials like Nancy Pelosi, who stood up on the floor of the House of Representatives as the speaker and said, you people that own these platforms had better be really responsible, and you'd better exercise really careful judgment about what you allow to be on your platforms, or else we're going to take away the privilege we gave you under Part A. Now that starts smacking of government action to try to stimulate them into particular areas. And what she did is she made specific reference in that case to the anti-vax stuff. Okay? Now, what the companies did in response to that is they commissioned a study by a private research group and said, what are the areas that we should be most careful about censoring? And the report came back saying, here are the following areas where you should be extremely careful about allowing any information on your websites about this. Number one, obviously, the anti-vax information. Number two, the John F. Kennedy assassination. Number three was 9/11. And number four was UFOs.
Only four?
Okay? And so the study actually was advising the platforms that they should censor any information about these subjects. And now here they are, lo and behold, with admissions right on the front pages of the news now across the country, that it turns out that we were right all the time about the UFOs. And it turns out that all the time that when they were censoring people who said, you know, there's reason to believe that the COVID-19 virus may have come from the Wuhan laboratory and not from the so-called wet market, you know, and they were censoring people all over the place to stop them from saying that stuff. And now, lo and behold, the agencies and stuff are saying that the high probability is that it was actually released out of the Wuhan laboratory. And they also stop people from saying things like, you know, you can't possibly say, the government is going around saying that if you get the vaccine, that's going to keep you from catching COVID-19. And not only that, it'll keep you from spreading it to other people. Neither one of those was true. Neither one of those things was true. Okay? And they now realize that. But they were actively suppressing people like Robert Kennedy Jr. and others from saying things like that. And so that we crossed into an extraordinarily dangerous area under the First Amendment, where we have a legislative structure that's been set up with Public Law 230, Part A and B, and these platforms where they've set up a mechanism where government officials can start to point to particular areas to silence people from having access to the information, and we are one of them. The UFO community is one of them. So that's my general response to this thing, that I think that the simple position you take is that entire area has to be revisited. And that but it's not exactly clear what the answer is to all of that right now, because these technologies have come on without people being prepared juridically to think their way through this. So they should give a call to Larry Tribe at Harvard Law School and see what he thinks about this. And I'll chat with Larry with some of the ideas we have.
We have another question? Yeah, Danny, just two small things came to mind while I was listening to you. First of all, with respect to Corso, I don't know what was in the home video he made for his grandchildren, but I know that in a number of interviews that he had, he also included this, that when the extraterrestrial asked him to turn off
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. That's not a coincidence.
No, yes, well, yeah, well, it's a good job back there, PJ. Good. We give him a high sign. Did you hear him say out loud? He said, wait a second, did you hear him say that? He said, is that Steve Bassett? Is that Steve Bassett on the line? And I went, yeah, that's Steve. Right there, right? No. No. You give him this one, or did that reach?
Testing. This is not on anyway. Return the.
Oh, it's.
There we go.
Okay. Look, I knew this is what happened. Okay. There we go.
I think it's pretty funny. No, Corso was asked about this, and in his responses, he said that when the extraterrestrial asked him to turn off the radar so it could leave, Corso responded telepathically, "What's in it for me?" And the extraterrestrial said, "A new world if you can take it." Now, that's a quote from Philip. I think that's kind of cool. And the other thing is, there's a small, well-known maxim that it takes two to make a lie, one to say it and one to believe it. But there's a lesser-known maxim, it takes two to make a truth, one to tell it and one to accept it. And I think we want to keep that in mind as we move forward.
Thank you, Stephen.
Right.
I always thought that Corso alien quote was a borrowing from Ben Franklin, but the alien probably knew his American history.
Yes, that's just what it was. They were probably there, right?
Very likely, yes.
So look, we are at 6:35 now. Because of the kind of special events that have taken place today, I thought it was important for us to kind of focus on these things and get questions and answers going here. And so I've diverted from the kind of normal presentation that I would have done. It's been eclipsed to some extent. And I know that it's getting late. You guys have been here for a long time. I don't want to protract this thing. I could, come up with another half a dozen really important, interesting things to talk about. But I get a sense that people are almost as tired as I am here today. And so if there's another pressing question or two, let's take it and make sure that we cover it before we go to dinner. But let's see if anybody has a couple of really pressing questions. And yes.
Danielle, I'm Jones reporting for The Vortex. This has been some incredible whistleblower testimony that's been reported on, which may lend to more insiders coming forward. But being that the American public is already somewhat distrusting of its own government, in your view, what may be potential avenues towards producing or in some way demonstrating the possession of these alleged retrieved non-human technologies and materials or bodies to help raise the standard of awareness about this issue in society rather than simply taking their word for it?
Well, okay, I think what's getting ready to happen is that Dave Grusch and Carl Nell and Chris Mellon, the people that were quoted in the article today and granted interviews for the article, are actively engaged in lifting people up and pushing them toward the Aero staff to get them to interview them. And what you're discovering is that if the Aero staff isn't active enough and responsive enough, that these people are inclined, not these people, but the witnesses are inclined to go around them.
Part of it, I think, was that Kirkpatrick himself undermined his cause with his hearing. I mean, he just seemed utterly bored and disinterested by the whole subject, explicitly saying, yeah, it's in my interest to give this to someone else and make it their problem. He actually said that.
Well, he said it was interesting. He said it was,
and then downplaying the whole anomalous nature of the whole thing.
It was an interesting quote he said. He says is that we have UAPs that are unidentified anomalous phenomenon. We have other things that are temporarily unidentified, which can be identified. But if we find something that is specifically confirmed to be man-made or a natural phenomenon, that becomes an SEP, someone else's problem. But if you think about it carefully, that he's talking about reserving to the office things that are not natural or not man-made.
He didn't give an idea that he wanted any of those cases.
No, he doesn't give the impression of being.
And so it wouldn't have inspired confidence in whistleblowers as well.
That's exactly right. And as Chris said, Mellon said in the article this morning, he said, rightly or wrongly, a significant number of these whistleblowers who have this information don't trust the leadership of AARO, which would be specifically Sean Kirkpatrick. And so that they're going, what we need to do as a community, we need to put as much pressure as possible on Sean Kirkpatrick and the staff people at AARO to show that if the people aren't trusting you, you'd better go out of your way to demonstrate that you're forward-leaning and really trying to get this information. I'm not sure that they're ever going to be willing to do it the way it's going to satisfy us. I'm not sure that, that we're going to let them up on this. But it may become necessary for people to demand that other people be put in charge of this. You know, to take some of the people, for example, who are involved in pushing to get the stuff exposed and put them in charge of the operation so that we know there are people there who really genuinely want to know.
Of course, he's a loyal DOD man. I mean,
Yes.
his whole career is that, and I suspect that's why he got where he was.
That's right. So the bottom line is that we need to mobilize a much more energized community to demand that this information be revealed. And that's why I want us all to participate in figuring out what some of these questions are so that we can start identifying these questions and putting them out to the people now that they know this is true, that they can feel empowered and authorized to ask these questions and have conversations among ourselves and instigate these discussions. This is an extraordinarily interesting set of subjects, okay? And so that's one of the things that we're going to be doing at the Romero Institute through our New Paradigm project there. And we're asking for your support. And you know, you can send nickels and dimes to us and help pay for staff people. You know, that we're actually contemplating hiring some of these people who are the whistleblowers, who would be able to be the kind of people who know the other whistleblowers and can go and get them. You know, we've done this in the past. We've shown that we are able to do things that some other groups haven't really quite been able to do. And so we want to earn your trust and the trust of the people that are wanting to come forward so that they will come to the Romero Institute and to our New Paradigm project, and we can then bring them to the Congress, bring them to the AARO community, bring them to the media if the others don't respond. That's some of the stuff that we're going to be doing, in addition to trying to craft a new paradigm worldview that actually integrates this information into a system of thinking that our human family will remain valued in our galaxy and not be treated like some primitive island tribe that discovers in 1955 that there's a world out there that they haven't known about, and within weeks their whole culture collapses because they've been so completely parochial and out of tune with the exterior reality around them that they realize that they've been so out of tune with reality that their culture is not worth saving. So we can't let that happen to us. So we're going to have to lean into this a lot and do a lot more work on identifying and answering these questions. Okay, so look at if there's any more questions, we'll take them. But otherwise, I thought.
All right.
I thought someone.
One more,
There it goes.
because it's getting late. You have to come up to the stage.
Oh, I don't know. I would like to just say that I feel especially privileged to be here at this time when we've been working hard. So many in this community have been working so hard and pushing through the dinosaur that is our government. Give credit to many of us who've faced those brick walls. We have our own Stephen Bassett. We had Linda Moulton Howe doing the citizens hearing, Stephen Greer. We have the Hertax. We have so many people that have invested years and tons of effort into pushing our government and forcing the narrative to be addressed. So I'm hoping it echoes with you guys, but I want to say how privileged, aren't we? So privileged to be here right now, today.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was it.
Terrific.
Thank you very much. That was great.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you for staying. This is the final session of our weekend together. We're deeply grateful for you being there, and I know that you're deeply grateful for being part of history here today, to have been here so we could play live for you the revelation of the admission on the part of high-level officials that they're in possession of a crashed UFO. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you at the next session of the Contact in the Desert.
Good night, everyone. Wonderful. Thank you, Danny.
Terrific. All right. Let's go get something to eat. Okay.
Hey, I would be very happy to help in any
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You're top number one.
All right.
Number one. Okay?
I'll talk with you privately.
Yeah, we'll do it.